"Sir, this line is for first class only." Her voice sliced through the ambient hum of the airport lounge, cold, sharp, and full of authority. The black man in front of her didn't argue. He didn't even blink. No indignation, no hesitation, just calmly extended his boarding pass. Jessica Lang, the gate agent, didn't take it right away. Instead, her eyes swept over him. Navy shirt, no tie, shoes polished but worn, posture straight, expression unreadable. "Please wait back there," she added, firmer now. "Coach boarding starts after." A soft chuckle came from behind. A white man in khakis, arms crossed. "He probably thinks premium economy counts," he said under his breath. A few quiet snickers followed. Not loud, but loud enough to say what they all were thinking. Asterisk, he doesn't belong here. Asterisk. Still, the man didn't move. He stood there silently and held out the ticket again. This time, Jessica took it. She glanced at the screen. Her face stiffened for just a second. Seat 1A. First class. Passenger name. Malcolm Deshawn. Asterisk, asterisk. "Oh, I see now. My bad," she said, her mouth curling into a forced smile. But the iciness in her voice never thawed. Malcolm didn't say a word. He didn't ask for an apology. Didn't look around to see who had laughed. He simply nodded once and walked forward through the boarding tunnel. A young woman near the velvet ropes leaned in to whisper to her boyfriend, "He handled that way better than I would have." Jessica turned back to her scanner, pretending it never happened. No apology. No hint of regret. The passengers behind her were already stepping forward. But not everyone moved on so easily. A man in the first-class cabin had been watching closely. Simple clothes, quiet presence, but sharp eyes that followed Malcolm as he walked down the aisle. Not suspicious, almost familiar, like he recognized something others had missed. The loudspeaker droned on. Names were called. Travelers pulled carry-ons across the tile floor. Most people had already forgotten what had just happened. But this flight wouldn't be forgettable. 45 minutes later, the entire cabin would know Malcolm Deshawn's name, and they'd wonder why he never said a word. But before that, before any of it, we rewind to just a few minutes earlier. The boarding area had been calm. Business travelers are scrolling through emails, tapping fingers on aluminum suitcases. A little boy darted after a rolling bag, oversized headphones slipping down his ears. The air carried the scent of stale lattes and long layovers. At the far end of the first-class gate, Jessica had adjusted her lipstick using the reflection on her tablet screen. She was new to this route, but not to the game. She had a system: smile, scan, classify. She could spot the hedge fund execs from the founders on startup exits in under 3 seconds. She knew which ones would demand extra champagne, and which ones would try to flirt by asking her name. So when a man in a finely tailored 3-piece suit stepped forward and flashed his platinum status card, she grinned. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Delaney." He didn't even look at her, just nodded and walked past. She was used to that, too. Then came a couple dressed in matching yoga sets, arguing over who got the window. Then an older woman in pearls gave her a tight smile and sniffed. "I hope they don't overheat the cabin again," she said. "We'll make sure it's comfortable, ma'am." Jessica replied in that customer service tone, sweet but hollow. Everything was moving like clockwork. Early boarding. Calm flow. No drama. That's when she noticed the boy. Not quite a boy. Not yet a man. Early 20s, maybe. Beat-up sneakers. Hoodie that reads Tuskegee Engineering. He wasn't in line, just leaning against the wall, watching quietly. He didn't seem nervous, just observant. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded, just waiting on someone, he said before she could even ask. She gave him a half smile. Not warm, but not rude. That was about the time the whispers started. Two airline staff members chatted near the counter, one holding a clipboard. The taller one leaned in, said something low, and snorted under his breath. The kid in the hoodie didn't laugh. He just looked toward the glass doors, like he knew who was about to walk through them. 3 minutes later, the man in the navy shirt walked through the glass doors. He didn't rush, didn't check his phone. He just paused, scanned the boarding area, then moved calmly toward the gate like he'd been here 1,000 times before. The boy in the hoodie straightened up as if on cue. The flight attendant, Jessica, was mid-laugh with another crew member when she noticed him approaching. Her smile flickered, just slightly, not because she recognized him, but because something about him didn't fit the usual mold. No name tag, no corporate jacket, no overstuffed laptop bag slung over one shoulder. Just that same quiet posture, calm, unimpressed. The boy stepped aside to let him pass. No words exchanged. Elijah handed over his boarding pass, and you already know what happened next. But what about the boy? Why'd he been waiting, watching so intently? And how did he seem to know exactly when Elijah would appear? To understand that, we need to hear what others say about Elijah Rivers. Not from him, because he rarely explains himself, but from those who've crossed paths with him, those who tried to sum him up before they knew better. 2 weeks before the flight, in a cafe near Chicago's Loop, a group of mid-level consultants sat crowded around a table with half-eaten salads and open laptops. Elijah, one of them scoffed. Yeah, he's intense. Intense how? Someone asked. Doesn't talk much. Shows up in meetings in plain clothes. Doesn't vibe. Wait, isn't he the IT guy? No, said the first one. I don't even know his title. He just appears. Sits in the back. Doesn't say a word unless someone messes up a number. They laughed. I thought he was someone's driver the first time I saw him, a woman added. He walked in with the junior analysts and sat in the corner. I even asked him to grab me a coffee once. And he did, with a smile. More laughter. No one brought up the part where Elijah had caught a $2.3 million forecasting error during that meeting. No one mentioned how, 2 hours later, the CEO of the parent company had called him directly, used his full name, thanked him, and then ended the call with "I owe you one." 3 months earlier at a corporate retreat in Colorado, a VP from finance had said, "That guy's too quiet to be in charge of anything. No presence." A director had nodded. Smart guy, sure, but no leadership energy, no gravitas. And let's be honest, the VP added, voice lower, not the kind of face you put on a brochure. They all agreed, and they were all wrong. Even back in his own neighborhood, people didn't know what to make of Elijah. At the corner barber shop, one of the old-timers once said, "That Rivers kid? Always polite. Tips well. Probably drives Uber or something. Always wearing that same jacket. Looks like he's headed somewhere, but never says where." The librarian at the branch down the street described him as respectful, quiet. "He borrows a lot of business books," she said. "I think he's trying to start something." Trying. People always said he was trying, never realizing he'd already done it. On that same flight, 2 rows behind Elijah, A white woman in pearls leaned over and whispered to her husband, "I think he's in the wrong cabin." Her husband looked over. "They let people upgrade with points." "Probably that." She nodded, but added after a pause, "He does carry himself well, though. For someone, you know." Meanwhile, back at the gate, just minutes before boarding, the boy in the hoodie had pulled out his phone. He wasn't scrolling. He was staring at a photo, a blurry image from a local newspaper. The headline read, "Anonymous donor saves local tech school from closure." There was no name in the article, just one quote. They didn't need a hero. They just needed a chance. The boy put his phone away, and when Elijah walked past him, he didn't speak, just gave him a slight nod of acknowledgement, something like a salute, a silent thank you, one only he understood. So how did a man like Elijah Rivers become someone so invisible and yet so powerful? What kind of past forges a man like that? To find out, we have to go back, way back, to when he had no seat in first class, no title, no face anyone remembered. Elijah was 6 the first time he heard the word property used to describe him. It wasn't a textbook, wasn't a joke from another kid on the playground. It was his landlord, speaking to his mother. "If your boy breaks another window, I swear to God, I'll evict you both. This isn't a shelter, Miss Rivers. I own this place, and everything in it, including peace and quiet." Elijah had been standing barefoot in the hallway, clutching a red crayon. The cracked window behind him had splintered when his toy car hit it the wrong way. He didn't understand every word the man said that day, but he understood enough to know one thing. He wasn't theirs to own. He hadn't meant to do it, but he also hadn't meant to learn, at that age, that some people saw him as less than human, less than enough, less than welcome. They moved 3 times before he turned 10, and every time it was the same drill. Pack fast, say nothing, leave behind whatever couldn't fit in a suitcase or a trash bag. Elijah kept his books, always, dog-eared, faded, sometimes still damp from basement leaks, but his. No matter how many addresses changed, the book stayed with him. They were the only things that did. He didn't speak much in class. Teachers wrote, quiet but bright, on his report cards. The kids had other names: Charcoal, Shadow Boy, Smart Mouth, too proud for Section 8. He learned to live just below the radar, polite, clean, unthreatening, but still invisible. His mother worked nights at a nursing home, graveyard shift, came home smelling like bleach and sleep deprivation. But every Saturday, no matter how tired she was, she made pancakes from scratch. Once, when he got jumped walking home, just for wearing shoes that looked too nice, she held him so tight he couldn't breathe. "I don't care what they say," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You are nice things because you deserve them." That was the only time he ever saw her cry. In high school, Elijah stopped responding to insults, stopped responding at all. He moved through hallways like mist, never caused problems, never lingered in anyone's line of sight for too long. But he remembered everything. The teacher who never called on him until every white kid had spoken. The guidance counselor who said, "Have you considered trade school? College can be a lot to handle." The store manager who followed him around the aisles, eyes sharper than any security camera. Each slight, each assumption, he logged it all, not out of bitterness, out of discipline, like line items in a quiet ledger only he could read. He got into a local community college on scholarship, worked 2 jobs, then 3, Late nights at the gas station taught him how men act when they think no one's watching. Day shifts at a warehouse taught him where corners get cut and who pays the price. Weekend tutoring taught him which kids got left behind when teachers were too tired or too rushed to explain things twice. He never posted about it, never asked for pity. He just took it all in. Systems, flaws, patterns, behavior. Everything was a blueprint if you look closely enough. And then one day, someone said his name like it mattered. It was a guest speaker from a visiting MBA program. Middle-aged, dressed clean but relaxed. He glanced at a printed handout, then looked directly at Elijah. "Elijah Rivers," he said, "I read your economic model. It's incredible." Elijah blinked. He didn't know what to say. No one had ever said his full name like that before. Like it meant something. Like he meant something. But recognition doesn't erase the struggle. It just sharpens a hunger. To understand how Elijah went from shadow in the hallways to silence in seat 1A, we have to trace the brutal path step by step. At 19, he learned how to function on 5 hours of sleep a night. And that was the luxury version. He was studying full-time, majoring in business analytics, working warehouse overnights, and tutoring kids on Sundays. He still showed up to church once a month, not because he had the time, but because he knew it would ease his mother's worries. He never told her he sometimes napped in a janitor's closet between lectures. Never told her he skipped meals to afford online certifications. She never saw that part. Pride wasn't what kept him quiet. Purpose did. At 21, he graduated top of his class from a public university most people hadn't heard of. He didn't attend the ceremony. It cost too much. It was too crowded, too likely to remind him how alone he was. Instead, he spent the day fixing the brakes on his car, microwaving rice, and updating his resume on a library computer. That night, he got an email. A small startup was hiring for an operations analyst. They'd found a case study on his GitHub profile, something he didn't even remember uploading. He got the job, moved to a city where he knew no one, rented a basement room that smelled like paint thinner and ambition. For the first 6 months, he said nothing in meetings, just listened. He learned the CEO's rhythms, noticed the gaps in the CRM, noticed how the supply chain was bleeding money because nobody had synced time zones between international teams. One day, without being asked, he sent the COO a slide deck. No branding, no fluff, just one title: Fixes that don't require a budget. 3 of the recommendations were implemented that week. No one credited him. No one thanked him. And Elijah Rivers never brought it up. He didn't care. Not really. He wasn't there to be liked. Over the next 5 years, Elijah moved through companies like wind through corridors. You didn't see him coming. You just noticed things working better after he passed through. Systems cleaner. Timelines tighter. Teams suddenly performing above expectations. Everywhere he went, he carried a notebook. Not a sleek digital one. Real paper, worn, stained, scribbled full of symbols only he understood. He wrote in it constantly. Numbers. Names. Who showed up late? Which meetings got derailed? Which executives asked the right questions? And which ones bluffed their way through? He knew who had power and who just held a title. He became fluent in office politics, but never played the game. Showed up early, left late, dressed simple. To most, he looked like just another mid-level analyst who'd probably stall out at some point. But to the few who really watched, he looked like gravity, quiet, constant, pulling things into order. By 32, Elijah had helped turn around 3 failing logistics branches. Quietly. No title upgrades. No headlines. No LinkedIn announcements. He walked into forgotten warehouses and walked out with operational strategies that save companies millions. Once, after a presentation, a board member had pulled him aside and said, "You've got a good head on you. Ever think about strategy?" Elijah had just smiled. He was strategy. He didn't need the nameplate. At 34, he made his first acquisition pitch. 5 executives. 1 quiet room. All of them older. All of them white. Midway through his proposal, one leaned forward and interrupted. "Are you the founder's assistant?" Elijah didn't flinch. "No, I'm the one who can keep your company from bleeding out in 18 months. Silence. 3 weeks later, the deal closed. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't post a humble brag online. No clap emojis. No self-congratulatory threads. What he wanted wasn't validation. It was the next room, the next broken system, the next table full of people saying, "That guy doesn't seem like much." So he could walk in, fix everything, and be gone before they even knew what happened. But even gravity gets disrespected when it shows up wearing the wrong skin. Elijah had climbed. Silently. Invisibly. Efficiently. But all it took was a uniform, an airport, one assumption, and suddenly none of it mattered. It began with a smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. He'd arrived 20 minutes early for a quarterly partner review. Downtown tower. All glass and ego. The receptionist wore a headset and a practiced grin. "Delivery entrance is on the side, sir," she said before he even spoke. Elijah blinked. "No delivery. I'm here for the 9 a.m. with Patel Group." Her smile didn't falter, but her head tilted. "Ah, catering." He pulled out his badge. The color drained from her face. "Sorry, we just had a lot of people in and out this morning." He nodded. No scene. No raised voice. But he noticed she didn't make eye contact after that. In the elevator, 2 junior associates whispered behind him. "He's not dressed like the usual consultants. Probably IT support." He didn't turn around, just adjusted his cuff and walked out when the doors opened. The conference room was all glass walls and short memories. Of the 8 people inside, only 2 knew who Elijah was. The others looked confused when he walked to the head seat. Someone offered him coffee. Casual, like they thought he was the intern. He declined politely, then opened his tablet and began his deck. 22 slides, clean, bulletproof, and quiet. His tone never shifted. His pace never rushed. Just number after number. Fact after fact. Midway through, a man in a tailored suit interrupted. "Sorry, you're Elijah Rivers?" "Yes." Regional strategy lead. A pause. A slow nod. Too slow. "So, your running point on this acquisition?" "I approved it." Another pause. A different tone this time. "Interesting." That word. Interesting. The corporate version of side-eye. Elijah kept going. But in the corner of his vision, one woman kept glancing at her phone. Another exec was clearly half listening, replying to messages. Someone even said aloud, "We'll need to run this by Patel himself." Elijah looked up. "You're looking at him." Silence. They didn't know. Didn't bother to know. Patel Group had restructured last month. Elijah was the new regional head, promoted after quietly outperforming projections by over 200%. It was in the internal memo, the one they hadn't read. because they hadn't thought someone like him could be someone like that. After the meeting, someone tried to smooth it over. Nothing personal, man. Just not what we expected. Elijah smiled. No worries. But something inside cracked. Not loud. Just a hairline fracture. A reminder. That night, he skipped dinner. Went for a walk instead. Past marble lobbies and neon signs. Past polished storefronts and strangers who locked their car doors when he passed. Past all the places he'd once imagined meant arrival. He didn't look bitter. He looked focused. Because Elijah Rivers knew some people see titles. Others see faces. But he was something else entirely. He was what you saw when the noise cleared, when the dust settled, and by the time you realized what he'd done, it was already done. He hadn't meant to do it, but he also hadn't meant to learn that some people saw him as less before he'd even opened his mouth. They moved 3 times before he turned 10. Every time, same drill. Pack fast, say nothing, leave behind what didn't fit in a suitcase or a trash bag. He kept his books. Always. Dog-eared, faded, sometimes damp from basement leaks, but his. He didn't speak much in class. Teachers wrote, quiet but bright, on his report cards. The kids had other names. Charcoal, Shadow Boy, Smart Mouth, too proud for Section 8. So he learned to live just under the radar. Polite, clean, unthreatening, still unseen. His mother worked nights. Nursing home, graveyard shift. Came home smelling like bleach and sleep deprivation. But she made pancakes on Saturdays. And once, when he got jumped for wearing shoes that looked too nice, she hugged him so tight he couldn't breathe. I don't care what they say, she whispered. You were nice things because you deserve them. That was the only time he ever saw her cry. In high school, Elijah stopped answering to insults. He just stopped answering. Walked hallways like mist. Never causing problems. Never staying in anyone's line of sight. But he remembered everything. The teacher who always called on everyone else first. The counselor who said, have you considered trade school? College can be overwhelming. The store manager who watched him closer than the cash register. Every slight, every condescension, logged, not with bitterness, but with precision, like entries in a silent ledger. He got into a local community college on scholarship, worked 2 jobs, then 3. Late nights at a gas station taught him how men behave when no one's watching. Day shifts at a warehouse showed him where corners get cut. Tutoring on weekends taught him who gets left behind when nobody has time to explain things twice. He never posted about it, never asked for sympathy. He just filed every lesson away, every system, every pattern. And then one day, someone said his name, said it right. Elijah Rivers. He looked up. A guest speaker from a visiting MBA program stood there. I read your economic model. It's incredible. He didn't know what to say. No one had said his full name like that before, like it meant something. Like he meant something. But recognition doesn't erase the grind. It sharpens the hunger. At 19, Elijah learned to live on 5 hours of sleep. That was the luxury version. He was studying full-time, business analytics, working warehouse overnights, tutoring on Sundays, showing up to church once a month so his mom wouldn't worry. He never told her he sometimes slept in a janitor's closet between classes, or that he skipped meals to afford online certifications. It wasn't pride. It was purpose. At 21, he graduated top of his class from a state university most people didn't know existed. He didn't attend the ceremony. Too expensive, too crowded, too likely to remind him how alone he really was. Instead, he spent the day fixing the brakes on his car, eating microwaved rice, updating his resume in a public library. That night, he got an email. A startup was looking for an operations analyst. They'd found his GitHub profile. He didn't even remember uploading that case study. He got the job, moved to a city where he knew no one, lived in a basement sublet that smelled like paint thinner and ambition. For 6 months, he didn't speak in meetings, but he listened. He learned the CEO's habits, the gaps in the CRM, the parts of the supply chain that bled money because no one was tracking time zones right. One day, unprompted, he sent the COO a slide deck titled, "Fixes that don't require a budget." No fluff, just results. They implemented 3 of them the next week. Didn't credit him, didn't thank him. When they saw him, not in the hood but downtown, in a suit, still not enough. He thought of his mother again. Her words after he got jumped. "You wear nice things because you deserve them." But now he wondered, what do you wear when people don't see you at all? But that wasn't the last time. In fact, the next insult would come at 30,000 feet. And this time, everyone would be watching. Some would smirk. Some would stay silent. One would film it. But none of them were ready for who Elijah really was. They boarded the flight late. Minor delay. Something about a catering truck. Elijah didn't mind. He never traveled for comfort. He was headed to Denver. A closed-door meeting. The kind where decisions are made in quiet tones over espresso and equity figures. His assistant had booked seat 1A. First class. Non-refundable. Non-transferable. Exactly what he needed. Space, quiet, and no eyes on him. But eyes came anyway. He stepped into the cabin with nothing but a tablet and a small leather case. No logo, no entourage, just presence. The flight attendant turned. Practiced smile. Trained to scan quickly. Then paused. The smile twitched. "Sir, can I help you?" "I believe this is me," Elijah said, handing over his boarding pass. She looked again, then looked at him. I see. Just making sure. Sometimes these seats get mixed." He nodded. Understandable. She didn't move. Didn't offer to take his bag. Didn't say welcome aboard. As Elijah settled in, he heard it from the row behind. Must have upgraded with miles. Male voice. No way he paid for that. Soft chuckle. Better hope he doesn't ask for champagne. Female voice. He didn't turn. Didn't flinch. Just adjusted the armrest and stared out the window. Then came the second wave. A man in business class stepped forward. Mid-40s. Tie too tight. Voice too loud. He looked at Elijah. Then at the flight attendant. "Excuse me. I thought this was 1A. She blinked. "Check the manifest." "It is. This gentleman is in the correct seat." The man squinted. "You sure?" Elijah spoke then. Calm. "Yes, I'm sure." The man shrugged. That slow, smug motion that said he wasn't convinced. He moved on, but not before muttering, "Whatever." Now other passengers were watching. Some discreetly, others not. A college-age girl, 2 rows back, started filming. No commentary, just filming. She'd seen this kind of moment before. Too many times. The flight attendant returned before takeoff. "Would you like a beverage before we depart?" Elijah nodded. "Still water, please." She came back with tonic. Didn't apologize. Didn't explain. Just walked away. He sat there, hands folded, jaw tight, not angry, not surprised, just disappointed, not in them. And how familiar this felt. The man across the aisle leaned over. "You handle that well, brother." Elijah glanced at him. Nodded once. "Thanks. Seen it too many times." The man continued, voice low. "You'd think a first-class seat came with basic respect." Elijah gave a half-smile. "Apparently, that's extra. But even on planes, gravity pulls." What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Elijah wasn't just any passenger. He was the reason this airline was still flying. And in the days before this flight, he'd made a decision that would change their entire future. They just hadn't seen it yet. Because Elijah never wore his power on his sleeve. He had a rule: never correct people when they misjudge you, unless they'll regret it later. It wasn't arrogance. It was calculus. A lifetime of watching rooms. And choosing the exact moment when silence becomes strength. 3 days before the flight, he sat in a quiet boardroom. 37 stories above downtown Atlanta. The view, sky and steel. The agenda, final review of a merger. The airline was bleeding money. 3 quarters in a row. Too many routes. Too few flyers. Bloated management. They needed a bailout. Or a buyout. Elijah had offered neither. Instead, he offered vision. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room. But when he spoke, people listened. He never was the type to boast. But when he spoke, people leaned in. No one knew that he had flown this airline 48 times in the past year. Not as a VIP, not under a corporate name. He booked the cheapest seats, ate the same food, sat through the delays, and listened. He wasn't watching the numbers. He was watching people. Who got skipped when they asked for help? Who got offered a second drink without asking? Who got a blanket tossed at them instead of handed? And who, like today, got stopped at the gate for not looking the part? When other executives asked how he knew the company culture was fractured, Elijah didn't pull out data. He simply said, "I've seen it from seat 28F. Some chuckled, thinking it was a metaphor. It wasn't. He laid out his proposal. Shut down 2 underperforming hubs. Replace 3 senior managers. Launch a new equity-focused customer policy. And, most importantly, retrain every member of the flight crew from the top down. Airlines don't lose passengers because of price," he told them. "They lose them because of moments like that one at the gate." The board agreed, but on one condition. He had to oversee the transition in silence. No title, no press, no red carpet, just results. That's why when he boarded the flight to Denver, seat 1A, no one knew who he was. And that's exactly how he preferred it. As he took his seat, he noticed the man across the aisle scrolling through his phone, thumb tapping in frantic bursts. The woman in pearls from earlier was glancing at her watch again and again like time owed her something. The flight attendant still avoided his eyes, though now her cheeks carried a tinge of pink. And from 3 rows back, the college student, the one in the Tuskegee hoodie, was still filming. He didn't judge. He just observed. That was his role. When the drinks came around, he asked for water. She handed him club soda again. He didn't correct her, just scribbled something on his tablet. 3 words: training protocol review. Outside, clouds rolled by in silence. Inside, the man they dismissed kept watching. But silence can only last so long. And this time, Elijah wouldn't be the one to break it. It started with someone finally noticing. Seat 3D. A young woman named Aisha, media studies major, cultural memory minor, part-time content creator. She didn't intend to film anything that day. But that look, the one the flight attendant gave Elijah when she first saw him, set off something inside her. Like someone walked into the wrong room and made it feel right just by standing there. So she recorded. Not for clout. For truth. 40 minutes into the flight, her phone battery flashed red. She stopped filming, started scrolling, paused on a frame. Elijah's profile, calm, thoughtful, watching the clouds like they were old friends. Something about his presence tugged at her memory. She zoomed in, tilted her screen, then opened Safari and whispered, Elijah Rivers. First results, fashion sites, a gospel singer, a tattoo artist. Then a LinkedIn page, private. But the tagline caught her breath. Regional strategy lead, Avix Group. Avix. That was the holding company that just acquired the airline 2 weeks ago. She clicked again, an old article. No photo, just a quote. If you want applause, go into politics. If you want results, shut up and fix things. Her heart beat faster. Meanwhile, up front, the flight attendant passed Elijah again. She avoided his eyes, but this time, he looked up. Can I ask something? He said. She stopped, tried to regain composure. Yes, sir. What training manual are you using? She blinked. Excuse me. For customer interaction. Is it current? I'm not sure, sir. I believe so. Let's hope. He smiled, small and measured. She blinked again, unsure. Is there something wrong? But Elijah had already turned back to his tablet. In the back, Aisha whispered in her AirPods. Girl, I swear, I think the man in first class 1A owns the airline. Her friend laughed. No way. I'm dead serious. Look up Elijah Rivers. Avix. Now. A pause. Then a hushed gasp. Oh my God. And just like that, the whispers began. Row by row, seat by seat. One said, strategy lead. Another said, silent partner. And the story, the real story, started to unravel. Another guy. I didn't mean anything by it. Elijah watched him. Just watched. No anger. No satisfaction. Just that same calm that had unnerved the entire plane. Just another guy. Elijah repeated softly. His voice wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't bitter. But it landed like a weight between them. That's the problem, isn't it? The man blinked. I didn't mean it like that. Elijah stood slowly. The man instinctively stepped back. I know exactly how you meant it, Elijah said, adjusting the sleeve of his blazer. You saw someone who didn't fit the picture in your head. And instead of questioning the picture, you questioned the person. The man opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't have a response. Look, he tried again. I just thought maybe I could apologize. Man to man. Elijah looked at him, really looked, and for a second, the man felt what it was like to be seen fully, not just looked at, but seen through. You want to apologize, Elijah said, but not because you understand. You want to apologize because now you're uncomfortable. The man's shoulders slumped. He was quiet. I'm not angry at you, Elijah added, but I won't make you feel better just so you can move on. He stepped forward, past him down the aisle. But I will leave you with this, he said over his shoulder. Next time, treat the next just a guy like he owns the place. Because one day he just might. And with that, Elijah Rivers walked off the plane. No entourage, no announcement, no raised voice, just quiet power. and behind him, a plane full of people sat still, not because they had to, but because they now understood. They hadn't just watched a man walk away. They'd just seen a mirror, and not everyone liked what it showed. Well, I didn't mean anything by what I said earlier. Elijah didn't blink. What did you say earlier? The man stammered. Nothing bad. Just a joke, about miles and stuff. Stupid, really. Elijah said. His tone was light, almost conversational, but the pause after that was heavy. The man rushed to fill it. I just didn't expect. Well, the press never shows who's really running things. You didn't need the press, Elijah replied. You needed decency. That landed harder than anything shouted could have. The man flushed, embarrassed. I didn't mean to disrespect you. You didn't, Elijah said. The man blinked. I didn't. Elijah smiled faintly. You didn't disrespect me. You disrespected the idea of me. A beat of silence. Big difference. The man opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say, except maybe, I'm sorry. Elijah nodded once. Accepted, not embraced. The man turned to leave, but Elijah's voice came one last time. For what it's worth, he said. The man paused. You wouldn't have acted differently, even if you knew who I was. He didn't turn around. Just walk faster. Aisha caught it all, not on camera. She'd stopped recording a while ago. Some things you just remember. At the front, the flight attendant stood by the door. She didn't speak, just bowed her head slightly as Elijah passed. He nodded back. Nothing dramatic, just dignity. But the air hadn't cleared yet, because the moment the wheels touched down, a message hit someone's phone. A message that would bring this quiet reckoning into public view. And when the world saw what had happened, there would be no walking it back. The plane touched down with a soft thud. No one clapped. No one spoke. It was the quietest landing Elijah had ever experienced. As if even the engines knew something had shifted. Aisha's phone vibrated before the plane even reached the gate. A message from her roommate. Girl, your video is everywhere. She blinked. What video? Then remembered. That 38-second clip she'd posted to her private story, just for her inner circle. Someone had screen recorded it, and now Twitter was on fire. Guy in one, it got treated like garbage. Turns out he's the exec who saved the airline last quarter. LMAO. Flight attendant told Elijah Rivers to wait in coach. She's about to wait in HR. Imagine thinking a black man doesn't belong in first class, then realizing he owns the airline. Views, 230K, then 340K, then 790K, in under an hour. By the time Elijah stepped off the jet bridge, 2 airline supervisors were waiting for him. They were sweating indoors. Mr. Rivers, one began, We had no idea you were traveling with us today. I noticed, Elijah said calmly. We'd be honored to escort you to the executive lounge. That won't be necessary. The other stepped forward. We're handling the situation internally. The crew involved will be retrained. I'm sure they will, Elijah said. Most board members had seen him twice, maybe 3 times in person. And even then, no tie, no entourage. He sat in the back, spoke last, never lingered after a win, never raised his voice. He signed internal memos with a single letter. E. Rivers. He declined interviews, avoided cameras, sent emails only when necessary. So when the video surfaced, Just a man standing quietly while being interrogated on a plane. His own colleagues did a double take. Wait, Elijah was on that flight. He's the guy in 1A. Why didn't he say anything? And then came the second wave of realization. Why does he look so calm? At Avix headquarters, the CEO watched the footage in full. No edits. No voiceover. Just raw, shaky video from a passenger's phone. Elijah standing in place. Calm, patient, silent. The CEO leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the frozen frame. Then he picked up the phone. Give me Rivers. Should I tell him what it's about? The assistant asked. He paused. He'll know. Back in Denver, Elijah was already walking into a closed-door meeting with two regional directors. They didn't greet him with handshakes. They stood, not out of fear, out of something else. Uncertainty, like they were meeting someone new. And in a way, they were. The younger director, Sanjay, was the first to speak. I had no idea you were flying commercial. Elijah offered a light smile. It's the only way to understand what's broken. The older one, Marcus, frowned. That's not your job anymore. You're supposed to be up here with us, making calls. Elijah said, just from a different angle. He opened a folder, setting it on the table. Inside, 6 months of handwritten notes, crew performance logs, customer experience surveys, delay metrics. I wasn't collecting data, Elijah said, flipping a page. I was collecting perspective. Later that day, reporters called. Cameras lined the block. News anchors waited for a soundbite. Elijah gave none. No press conference. No tweet. No Instagram story. Instead, Avix released a short post. We stand behind the quiet leaders, the ones who build, listen, and act. Mr. Elijah Rivers will continue to lead our regional transformation efforts with full authority. No noise, but it hit like an earthquake. And then came the flood. Journalists dug deeper. Old classmates resurfaced. He always sat in the back of the room, but when he spoke, you remembered. I thought he was someone's assistant. Turns out, I was working for him. He once fixed our warehouse in 2 days. Never asked for credit. Just disappeared. Even his mother saw the video. She called that night. Baby, she said, her voice trembling, they finally see you. He smiled into the phone, into the quiet. They see what they want. No, she whispered. They see what you wouldn't show. Meanwhile, the airline scrambled. PR statements, HR reviews, emergency meetings. The flight attendant who questioned him was placed on leave. But Elijah never said her name. Not once. Because for him, this wasn't about revenge. This was about rhythm. The rhythm of power earned quietly. Of truth revealed, not shouted. Of a man who never needed to raise his voice, because the world would echo for him. And now, the silence he carried had become contagious. In its wake, everyone had to respond. Some with shame, some with respect, some with questions they had never dared ask themselves. The plane may have landed, but the weight of that flight, that quiet resistance, that still dignity, was still in the room. The next morning at Avix's Denver branch, the break room was hushed. Coffee cups sat untouched. Bagels were half-eaten. No one was making eye contact, especially not with him. The man who always took the elevator alone. The one who wore the same navy blue shirt 3 days a week. The one they'd assumed was just another analyst. Until last night. Until the clip. Until they realized he wasn't just in the building. He was building it. Entitlement. The subtle hierarchy she hadn't known she was upholding had cracked. Now, every routine felt heavier. The coffee she sipped tasted stale, not because it was, but because it came from the same hands that once dismissed someone with it. Megan began replaying moments not just from that flight, but from years of flying. How many passengers had she scanned past too quickly? Who had she overlooked, underestimated, sized up in a blink? She didn't hate Elijah Rivers. She envied him. Not his power, not his fame, but the way he carried the weight of being judged and still moved like it didn't stick. Like gravity bent around him, but never slowed him. He didn't flinch. When coworkers made jokes that didn't sit right, she laughed, then forgot. When security pulled aside passengers who fit the profile, she looked away. When she corrected a passenger more harshly than the situation demanded, she justified it with protocol. But Elijah's story didn't leave room for justification. It only left space for reflection. At night, unable to sleep, Megan started journaling. Not for public redemption, but to excavate what she'd buried under years of performative professionalism. She wrote about the time her own brother was pulled over 3 times in 1 month. She wrote about how she learned to speak soft on the phone to sound more palatable. She wrote about the time she got promoted over a colleague who trained her, and how she didn't ask why. Elijah had walked through the fire and didn't scorch anyone, and yet the heat made Megan sweat. 2 weeks later, HR called, not for punishment, for mediation. Elijah had declined to file a formal complaint. No lawsuits, no press statements, just one note. She looked me in the eye. That's more than most. The company wanted to quietly move on, but Megan said no. Not to keep fighting, but to start rebuilding. I'd like to write a formal apology, she told the HR rep. Not because I'm supposed to, because I need to. The rep raised an eyebrow. To Elijah? To the people who didn't get to be Elijah. That day, Megan didn't feel like a flight attendant. She felt like a person trying to do something unfamiliar, grow. And sometimes, that's louder than any viral video. Right. He hadn't done anything. Not when it counted. Not when coworkers made lazy jokes. Not when his supervisor repeated an idea he just voiced and got credit. Not when a black colleague was assigned cleanup duty after a conference call ended, even though it wasn't his job. Alex had watched, silently, politely, professionally, because that's what he was trained to be. Invisible enough to avoid conflict, present enough to seem like a team player, smart enough to stay silent when the room turned sharp. But silence, he now realized, wasn't neutral. It was permission. And in that room, with Elijah's quiet presence grounding them all, he finally saw what it meant to be still and strong. Elijah didn't fill space. He honored it. He gave people a choice, to speak honestly or to stay safe. Alex had stayed safe for too long. So as the last few people lingered, shuffling chairs, thanking Elijah, walking out into the humming hallway, Alex stayed seated. Elijah noticed. That evening, he drafted an email to his manager, not to complain, not to accuse, but to request a quarterly conversation about culture. Open all, no rank, no cameras, just stories. He signed it simply, because the strongest voices aren't always the loudest. He didn't send it right away. He reread it 3 times, deleted a line, added a line, then hovered over send. His finger trembled, then clicked. Across town, Megan sat alone in her apartment, journal open beside her tea. She didn't know why she felt different. She just did. Not absolved, not redeemed, just ready to listen more, to watch less, to be someone who never again missed a presence in front of her just because she didn't see a title. And somewhere above them, a plane cut across the sky, quiet, unseen, carrying someone who carried more than luggage. Elijah sat in seat 1A, reading, thinking, leading without needing to be known. He looked out the window, not because the view had changed, but because now, finally, people were starting to. The one who looked away, not because you didn't care, but because you didn't know how to. Because discomfort whispered, stay in your lane. Don't get involved. Don't make it about you. Or maybe you were Megan, well-meaning, friendly, proud of being kind, but unaware of what your kindness missed. Unaware of how often you mistook proximity for understanding. Or maybe, just maybe, you were Alex, watching, listening, afraid of being wrong, afraid of being right, afraid that speaking too late meant not speaking at all. But now, like him, you realize silence isn't safety. It's surrender, because every hallway nod, every quiet act of decency, every moment where someone feels seen, it matters. This story, it's not just Elijah's. It's yours too. Not because you boarded the plane, but because we're all passengers on someone else's flight. And now that you've seen it, the culture, the cost, the courage, what will you do when the quiet moment comes? Because the change won't start in boardrooms, or emails, or viral clips. It starts here, with one voice, then another, then you. Thank you for staying until the final word. Because if you did, that means the story wasn't just about Elijah. It was a mirror, a quiet one, held up to your life, your choices, your silences. Maybe you saw yourself in Megan, thinking professionalism meant neutrality, until you saw the cost of being neutral. When the moment asked you to be human, maybe you were Alex. Not cruel, not careless, just still, until stillness started to feel like siding with the storm. Or maybe, in different moments, you've been all three, caught in the pause between knowing better and doing better. So now the question isn't, what would you do if you were on that flight? The real question is, what are you doing where you already are? At the table, in the hallway, in line, in a moment right before a joke you don't laugh at, or the moment after a comment you don't correct. Because the world doesn't change with headlines. It changes in the space between them, when no one's watching, but someone's feeling. And if you stayed with Elijah's story this far, it means a part of it was yours. So let's end not with what went wrong, but with what could quietly go right. 1 week later, Elijah walks through the airport again. Same suit, same gait, same walk. But this time, no one questions. No one stops him. A gate agent looks up, meets his eyes, not with suspicion, not even with recognition from a viral clip, but with quiet respect. The kind that says, I see you. I'm glad you're here. He nods. Boards. Same seat. But everything feels different. Not because he changed. Because they did. That's the thing about dignity. It was never something we give to others. It was always something we either recognize or reveal we never had. And maybe next time, when someone walks toward us, instead of scanning for titles, we just make space. Thank you for flying with us. If this story touched something in you, there are more. More Elijahs, more moments, more quiet truths waiting to be seen. We'll meet you in the next one.